News Peaks.
Not Newspeak.
Not News Speaks.
News Peaks.
Should we give it a go? Cool.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Ready? And
Yeah.
Diego Garcia. It was Diego Garcia. Yeah.
Yeah,
Quite
no,
Diego.
I can do that.
Yeah. 3.
Hi there, this is episode 1 of News Peaks, and I'm Tabby Taylor.
I'm Conor Naylor.
I'm James Dopley.
And I'm Natalia Mini.
Today we're going to talk about Diego Garcia. Before we start, we're going to see a quick clip of what the general public think when they hear the name Diego Garcia.
Who is Diego Garcia? Is he a footballer or something?
Fashion? I don't know.
Yeah, I know Diego Garcia, yes. Well, I don't know him, but I heard of him.
Is he an artist? Who's Diego Garcia? Is he a painter?
Diego Garcia.
Islands in the Indian Ocean.
I think understanding and knowing about Diego Garcia is important because it is so little known. It's an example of historic and ongoing injustice where big powers, the United States and Britain, have trampled over the human rights of a small group of people. And it's an outrage that the governments, the way the government's treated the Chagosians, and that they have continually covered it up and lied and misled people.
It's actually part of Britain. It's actually part of the British Indian Ocean Territory. And it's an island, or specifically an atoll, in the Indian Ocean, part of something called the Chagos Archipelago, which is a group of islands in the Indian Ocean. 2,000 people, known as the Chagosians, lived on these islands until the last of them were evicted from their homeland by British authorities in 1973.
And when were they brought there?
They were there from like when the slaves were there. Effectively, they used to work there as on the coconut plantations.
So in the 1960s, what was Diego Garcia like? Was it like a nice place to be before?
Well, I mean, it's got like names as like Paradise Island, that sort of thing.
How many people were living there?
1,800-ish. It was quite small societies. There were lots of villages on these islands. They had their own ruling system.
But that was all destroyed. Britain was actually supposed to give back the Chagos Islands back to Mauritius, but they didn't.
We did a deal with Mauritius in order to. It's so that we would keep Diego Garcia and the Chagosian Islands in particular became something called the British East Indian Ocean Territory, and they would get the independence and some amount of money.
The British Indian Ocean Territory Administration was formed in 1965 when it was decided that these islands would be used in future for defense purposes.
Why did Britain want to have Diego Garcia?
They wanted it because the US wanted it, because of its...
But did they know that before they decided to take it?
Yeah.
The US visited Diego Garcia on several occasions in the past, and certainly a decision was made in 1969 to remove the population and to establish the military base.
Why did the U.S. choose Diego Garcia? They were looking for isolated, strategically located islands in the late 1950s and early 1960s from which they might be able to maintain global power and control. And specifically, they were looking for islands that had small populations that they could simply remove, and within the hopes that no one would notice and no one would object. And sadly, they were able to carry it out with Diego Garcia in the sense of hiding the expulsion from much of the world for at least a good number of years.
Whether you agree with the military base or not, all around the world, local communities live next to military bases and there's no problem. And so I think their being evicted from the islands was a big mistake. And the other really appalling thing is that it was made by what's called an order in council, which is a bit of an archaic method used by successive governments to introduce a policy where there is just executive responsibility for that policy.
And the government used this as a back channel to create the British Indian Ocean Territory without any sort of oversight, without any sort of scrutiny. It's a way of slipping underneath the...
radar.
Yeah, basically. And without the permission of anybody, without a vote, without anything. Like, they're just allowed to do it.
Constitutionally, it's legal to have an order in council, but I think morally, in this case, this should have been debated by Parliament. Had it had that scrutiny, I don't think we would have seen the eviction of the islanders in the late 60s.
So what were they after then when they were searching for the island? They were after
The sort of equipment they have, the long range bombers specifically. It means that it projects American air power into the Indian Ocean, which means they can reach
Middle
the Middle East,
Asia,
Africa, Southeast Asia in particular, India.
They've sort of got
anywhere
perfect
they really
spot
need
to
to,
attack everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It certainly had to do with the Cold War, and the Cold War has ended, but still they are using the place to, as you've seen, military strikes in Iraq and certainly in other areas in the past.
It's certainly among the most important because it is so strategically located, and because of its isolation and the fact that no one can go there, it lets the U.S. military and other parts of the U.S. government do what it wants. So it's among the biggest and most important bases in the world.
David Vine's Island of Shame kind of goes into how America sort of expanded after the war, the Second World War, and how they've kind of attempted to keep power in certain parts of the world. And he kind of puts across this theory that America attempted to be empire of bases.
Well, they got some in Britain, Lacaneath.
Yeah.
They've got one in Okinawa.
You can see a map of like where they are.
The deal that was cut was slightly cleaner than America just going in and taking, obviously, we are one of America's closest allies, and immediately in that period of decolonization, America saw so many opportunities to expand its tendrils all across the world.
What did Britain get from this bargain?
They got a $14 million discount.
The Polaris project.
What's the Polaris?
That's their
nuclear
project, effectively.
We use Trident at the moment, but before that, we were using an American missile system.
And that's what they received the $14 million discount on.
Yeah.
And so in exchange for that, we gave them
we gave them the lease, the 50-year lease with the option of another 20 years.
Did they take the 20 years?
Now you mention it, yes. The negotiations for America extending their use of Diego Garcia for another 20 years will begin in 2015, as the original agreement expires in 2016.
So in the simplest possible terms, you've got us trading an island for a $14 million discount on nuclear arms.
Yes.
It's kind of shocking that they're putting that kind of just price tag on they've clearly kind of ratioed
You're
out.
worth £14 million in missiles.
I think many people care because they recognize that this terrible injustice was done to this people, and no one defends what the U.S. and British governments did in expelling the Chagosians. Even the British and U.S. governments don't defend what they did in the 60s and early 1970s. So I think it's a story that people gravitate to very quickly.
In a memo to the US from a British diplomat, it read, "The objective of the exercise is to get some rocks which will remain ours. There will be no indigenous population except seagulls. Unfortunately, along with the seagulls go some few Tarzans and Man Fridays that are hopefully being wished on Mauritius."
Oh god, that's awful. That's horrible. I can't believe that's actually written down. As somebody actually sent that.
No, it's a good example of classic imperial kind of philosophy that they're sort of the third world is full of Tarzans and Man Fridays, and I think that's almost an interesting reason as to why they thought it was an acceptable thing to do.
Supremacism, basically.
Yeah.
How did they get rid of them?
It was quite a long process because they didn't want it to be like an obvious thing, I suppose.
They started when family were going to Mauritius or Seychelles for holiday, they stop you from coming back. When you go to the office to get your ticket to board the ship to go back, you've been told that you can't go back. People started to stop getting food. There's no more food. They send away the doctors, the nurses, they close the shop, and people started to think what's going on.
So effectively it is coercion. You're taking away the ability to live on this island.
If that's not coercion, then
coercion
must have been awful. Yeah. It did get worse after that. So in 1971 they did something pretty astonishing. Wanting to empty the island completely, they killed 1,000 of the Chagosian pets, mostly dogs.
They started paying people to kill the dogs, poison the dogs. And you are standing there with your parent, hearing your pets being gassed and dead. How do you think a child feel? And after hearing that and saying that, the parents said, okay, they are doing that to our dogs. Soon they will do with our kids. We better go, because they were refusing to go, even without food, without help from the doctors and nurses. When after the gassing of the dog, they were scared for the life of their kids.
So by 1973, they'd gotten rid of. They took the last ship away from the island. You were allowed to take one suitcase on the ship, because they were just using this terrible ship which was meant to sail from Mauritius to the Seychelles, effectively.
Yeah. From what I've read about it, it sounded like the ultimate irony is it sounded so much like a slaving ship, like the conditions that they were kept in.
Yeah, like women and children slept on crates going over. They were put in a prison when they got to the Seychelles.
The manager will tell you, okay, tomorrow you're going to board the ship with your family. The father and 5 child will go on a ship. The mother and the other 4 child will go on another ship. In the midway at sea, the captain been told that, okay, this ship is going to Mauritius and the other one is going to Seychelles. And these people have never been able to get in touch with their sibling or parent until some of the parents are dead already. Family were split up, your belongings stay behind. You have only the few clothes that you brought with you to Seychelles or Mauritius. And in the 65, 68, people were being told that Diego Garcia had been sold. So you can't go back.
There's plenty more that we don't know about because no one can go there unless they're in the US or British military. Journalists haven't been able to go, human rights investigators haven't been able to go, and most importantly, the Chagosians have been barred from going back to their homeland.
It's like if all of the problems with our society and our government and all that, you can take it like a petri dish. You can look at Diego Garcia and see all the things that the lack of democracy, the lack of human rights, lack of consideration for other cultures,
minorities.
Yeah, the whole Western imperialist outlook, neo-imperialism, the whole the supremacy, Western supremacism. It's everything you can see in this particular case, this tiny little island.